And we are back for round 4 here at the Alabama Legacy IQ here at JC's House of Cards. In this round, we have Chris Kucera playing Sneak and Show versus Corey Kozlowski playing Big Red. Players are shuffling up for game 1. I'm not sure who's on the play. We'll find out in just a moment. It looks like uh, I got the looks like Corey went first on a mountain. Chris is gonna, and then pass the turn. Chris is gonna play a flooded strand and fetch, getting an island. And we'll see what the follow-up play is. Possibly a cantrip, ponder, preordain. Those are standard cantrips in the Sneak and Show deck. Could be Brainstorm, probably less likely being that it's turn 1. It's going to follow it up with a Lotus Petal and a second Lotus Petal, so we could be seeing a Show and Tell right off the bat, and that's what we're going to get. He's going to sack both Lotus Petals for mana, and we're going to see a Show and Tell on turn 1. We'll see what each person has. It looks like Omniscience and Emrakul come into play. Emrakul's a good card, but Chris is going to be able to play everything for free off the Omniscience. We'll see if he can find the win, because if Corey gets another turn, then this game will probably be over, as Chris will be forced to probably sack his entire board to the Annihilator trigger off the Emrakul. Chris is going to cast Intuition, and we'll see what he intuitions for. Looks like Chris is going to Intuition for 3 copies of Emrakul, meaning he will get one of those, and the other 2 will go be discarded to be shuffled back into his deck. And I assume Chris is going to go ahead and cast that Emrakul. Looks like he's going to Cunning Wish first. So we'll see if see what Chris Cunning wishes for. He's going to go to his sideboard. In Chris's sideboard, we've got 2 Defense Grid, a Red Elemental Blast, a Pyroblast, a Flusterstorm, a Misdirection, a Surgical Extraction, 2 Kozilek's Return, a Pyroclasm, a Beseiju, an Intuition, a Through the Breach, a Firemind's Foresight, and a Release the Ants. And it looks like he went for the Firemind's Foresight off that Cunning Wish. So we're going to see him cast that off the Omniscience. And we'll see what he gets with that. It looks like it's going to be a Spell Pierce, a Cunning Wish, and I can't tell what the card in the middle is. Looks like an Impulse. So he's going to go ahead and cast that Impulse. And he's going to go ahead and Cunning Wish again for Release the Ants. And he's going to cast Release the Ants and Brainstorm in response, probably putting that Emrakul back on top to make sure that Clash trigger off the Release the Ants has the best chance of winning. So with that Brainstorm putting Emrakul back, as long as there's not another Emrakul on Corey's side, it looks like Chris Kucera is going to get game 1 off the off the turn 1 Omniscience, or Show and Tell into Omniscience. So he's resolving the Brainstorm. He's going to preordain. Drawing a card. He's going to go ahead and cast the Emrakul and cast a Gristlebrand. And then he's going to cast Release the Ants, clashing. So we'll see what they flip. Through the Breach was flipped by Corey, so it looks like that Release the Ants is not going to get Chris the kill here, but with the extra turn, he will be able to attack Annihilator Trigger, and this game is game 1 is over, and we'll be going to Chris Kucera. Off the back of that turn 1 show and tell into Omniscience. Got a little bit, he had to do some work for that game 1, because Corey did have the Emrakul to put in, which can be very, could have created a lot of problems if Chris couldn't find the kill right there, but as so he did find what he needed and was able to get that win. So we're going to move on to game 2. And in the sideboards, we've already talked about Chris's a little bit. He's got 2 defense grids, a red elemental blast, a pyroblast, a flusterstorm, a misdirection, a surgical extraction, 2 Kozilek's returns, a pyroclasm, besage you, intuition, through the breach, firemind's foresight, and a release the ants. So not really sure, you know, a lot of this stuff is not gonna be great in this matchup. You know, besage you, flusterstorm, the blast. I mean, you know, being that he's playing against a red deck, you know, don't know what he's gonna bring in. Now, all really Chris saw game 1 was a mountain and an Emrakul, so he could think he's possibly on Sneak and Show also. Not sure if he knows what Corey is playing. But the Through the Breach could be very helpful if he can get to that. Being able to cast an Emrakul and wipe out a bunch of your opponent's board can be very helpful. Bringing in another Intuition, just an extra copy of Intuition as a way to get pieces you need, can be useful. And on Corey's side, we've got 2 Chandra Torch of Defiance, 2 Defense Grid, a Fiery Confluence, 2 Ingot Chewers, 2 Kozilek's Return, 2 Magus of the Moon, 2 Pyrostatic Pillars, and 2 Tormod's Crypts. So Defense Grid could, you know, being that he's playing against a blue deck, Defense Grid might come in as just a way to make sure he doesn't get, you know, any of his important things, Force of Willed, or things like that. You know, it helps him make sure his Blood Moons and his Chalices and things like that resolve. Magus of the Moon in a matchup like this is not great. You know, Chris isn't really using his graveyard, so Tormod's Crypts not looking great. Ingot Chewers. So it looks like, you know, these are 2 very streamlined combo decks in a sense that they're trying to, you know, Corey's trying to lock his opponent out of the game through the use of Blood Moon and Chalice of the Void. And Chris is just trying to, you know, power out a Sneak and Show and get an Omniscience into play for an Omniscience kill, or play a Emrakul or Gristlebrand and in the game fairly quickly. So there's probably not going to be a ton of sideboarding go on here, especially with Chris having the Cunning Wish package. A lot of that you want to stay in your sideboard for wish targets. So we'll see how they sideboard as we move on to game 2, and they are shuffling up right now. So this matchup seems like one that could be very favorable for whoever's on the play. Although Chris did win that game on the draw, Corey didn't have a turn one Blood Moon or a turn one Chalice. Blood Moon's not going to do a ton in this matchup, as Chris is a red deck um, and does play quite a number of basics. So if he knows he's up against the big red deck, then he can fetch for islands and play around the Blood Moon, so he can still cast his spells. Now, on that same note, though, a Chalice of the Void on a one can be very not necessarily backbreaking for the Sneak and Show deck, but can be very inconvenient as it does stop your brainstorms and your ponders and your preordains and a lot of your cantrips that allow you to cycle through your deck quickly and find the pieces you need to combo off. So we'll see if Corey can get a Chalice into play early and maybe slow down the filtering of the Sneak and Show deck and give him enough time to get his sneak attacks down and in the game through his own Emeralds or Gristlebrands. Looks like players have drawn their starting hands. Looks like Chris did mulligan his first hand. It's down to 6, so looks like he's scrying right now. So it looks like he did decide to keep his 6-card hand. Looks like he's got a fetch. See a ponder, brainstorm. It looks like a couple of land. So he's probably just looking to filter through. Looks like an Emrakul in hand. Looks like we're gonna have a turn one City of Traders. And a Simian Spirit Guide into a Seething Song on turn one, straight into a sneak attack with the 1 mana floating to activate. So we're going to see a turn one sneak attack with an Emrakul into play. That's going to swing and put Chris down to 5. So Chris already in a difficult spot. But with that being said, there's no red mana currently on Corey's side, so he's going to have to either get another Simian Spirit Guide or play a Mountain, which will get rid of the City of Traders, but give him the activation of the sneak attack. So Corey just passed the turn back to Chris. Chris is going to brainstorm. Looks like he found 2 intuitions, possibly. Maybe an impulse off of that. So we'll see if he decides to keep or shuffle those away and draw a fresh card. Looks like Chris is still trying to decide, still pondering his options. No pun intended, or all pun intended. Looks like he's choosing to rearrange them. It looks like he is going to leave those on top, and he's going to go ahead and draw. It looks like a show and tell, actually, that was drawn. So he's going to pass the turn back to Corey. Corey's going to tap the City of Traders for mana and then play his Mountain, getting a activation off the sneak attack and playing a Wormcoil Engine. So Corey's going to get game 2 off the back of that turn 1 Seething Song into sneak attack, giving him an Emrakul attack, and just finished it off in pretty easy fashion on his next turn. So we've got a 1-1, 1 game to 1 tie now. We're going to be going on to game 3, where Chris will have the choice of being on the play or the draw. I'm assuming he will play. Seems like a big advantage in fast matchups like this. And we'll see if they decide to, investigate their sideboards anymore. Maybe Chris having a little more information. If he wasn't sure exactly what Corey was up to in game 1, he definitely does know now. Seeing the Seething Song and the sneak attacks, he can safely assume that he's, playing the big red deck. So we'll see if they decide to sideboard again or whether they just shuffle them up and go to game 3. And it looks like both players like their configurations as they are, and they're just going to shuffle them up and draw 7. So we've got our players drawing their opening 7-card hands for game 3. Looks like Chris has got some land, a couple of cantrips, maybe a Gristlebrand in there. Does have an Ancient Tomb, so we'll see if he decides to keep that or if he decides to mulligan. In a matchup like this, knowing that you need to be pretty quick could influence your decisions, but it looks like Chris is going to keep, and he's just going to start out with a turn 1 Island Ponder. Looks like the Ponder finds another Ponder, maybe a Show and Tell or an Intuition. Couldn't tell what that was. It looks like he is going to keep and draw. Looks like a Force of Will was drawn, so that'll give him good protection against any possible big turn 1 plays Corey could have. So we're going to see Corey just play a Mountain, and looks like he's going to exile a Simian Spirit Guide and play a Defense Grid. So we'll see if Chris wants to counter that. Looks like he's going to decide not to counter that and just take his turn. So he will draw for the turn. So he's going to play an Ancient Tomb and then pass. So he does have access to 3 mana, but there is no Show and Tell. And it looks like it was an Impulse that was drawn. So he's going to pass back to Corey, and Corey's just going to pass and back to Chris after playing no land. So it looks like Corey's a little land light. Chris is going to play a Volcanic after drawing for the turn and lead off with a Ponder. And the Ponder looks like it finds Force of Will, Sneak Attack, and couldn't tell what the third card was. But it does look like he's going to choose to keep those. Looks like the Force is going on the bottom 3. It looks like the Sneak Attack. Looks like a Spell Pierce was the third card, and that is the card that was drawn. And he's just going to pass the turn back to Corey. We'll see if Corey found a land, or maybe some alternate ways to produce mana. It looks like he didn't, and he will just draw and pass the turn back. So Corey being a little mana screwed right now, and land light making it difficult for him to play this game 3. He's just going to pass back, and Chris is going to play a Sneak Attack off of his Ancient Tomb and Island Volcanic, and then it looks like Chris is going to go ahead and fetch for a Volcanic Island. Looks like we're going to see a Sneak Attack activation here. We'll see what threat Chris has to put into play here. Looks like it is going to be a Gristlebrand, so we're going to see Chris sneak that Gristlebrand into play. We're going to see an activation of Gristlebrand, and Chris is going to draw 7 cards, and we'll see if from here Chris can find the win. Looks like Chris is going to pay the 7 again, going down to 3. And draw 7 more cards off that Gristlebrand. Knowing that the Gristlebrand has haste off the Sneak Attack, and knowing that you're not under really any kind of pressure right now, you can afford to go down to a low life total, knowing you're going to get that attack in with the Gristlebrand, and the lifelink trigger will bring your life total back up. So we saw Chris draw 14 cards, and then he did indeed attack with the Gristlebrand. Looks like damage happened, and now we're just waiting for Chris to discard at the end of his phase down to 7. Then it looks like we're going to see a passing of the turn back to Corey. So it looks like Corey's wanting to look and see what Chris discarded just to kind of see what, maybe give him a little bit of information about what possibly is in Chris's hand. It looks like there was a couple of cunning wishes in there, possibly some land, maybe a few cantrips. But Corey will get another turn. We'll see if he drew any mana. Looks like a Simian Spirit Guide. Looks like a second Simian Spirit Guide into a Seething Song. So looks like the Seething Song did resolve and is going to have Corey with 5 mana. So Corey is going to use that 5 to cast Sneak Attack and then sneak in a World Spine Worm and attack. And Corey, after being land locked for a few turns, found the Spirit Guides.
So we can start talking now?
Yep. And we are back getting ready for round 5 of the Alabama Legacy IQ here at JC's House of Cards. We've got Corey Kozlowski again playing the big red deck and
Jacob Oakley on Bant Deathblade.
Bant Deathblade.
Yep.
So this should be an interesting matchup. We've got a combo deck versus a kind of a mid-range control deck. So it can come out quick, can come out more controlling. So we'll see how this turns out. I've got Corey's deck list in front of me, and my casting partner here has Jacob's deck in front of him.
So Jake has 4 days, 4 Force of Will. Other than that, he doesn't have very much disruption in terms of this matchup. I guess he has 4 swords as well, which can kill some of the creatures, but usually unless it's like Inferno type or something, I mean, Grizzlebrand drawing 7 is enough, usually 14 or how many ever. Emrakul obviously can't be Swords to Plowshare. World Spine Worm comes with dudes.
Yeah.
Wormcool Engine's actually pretty bad against Swords to Plowshare, so he's got some effective interaction. He has a Vendilion Click, a Wheel Hold on 3, a bunch of true names. Most of those are kind of slow. Vendilion Click is okay.
Yeah, and on Corey's side, I think being on the play versus the draw is going to be big in this game because early on he's got 4 Blood Moon and 4 Chalice of the Void that can come down really early, and if he can get that around counter magic, Blood Moon especially, being this is a 4-color Bant deck, the no basics, if he can get that down before he can get a Mana Dork or a Deathrite Shaman in play, it's going to be really hard for the Bant Deathblade deck to do anything.
On the subject of counter magic, the hand Jake Oakley's currently staring at has multiple dazes and a force. Don't think he knows what he's playing against. But he did pitch the hand. But had he kept that, it did have force, blue card, and multiple dazes. Kind of interesting. I would think he would, at this point in time in the tournament, he would know that he's playing against what he's playing against, kind of. And I think if he knew, he would certainly have kept the hand. Okay, so here we are, Jake looking at another hand. He's got a mana creature. He's got force blue card. Looks like he even has daze. Looks like a good hand out of Jacob's side, especially for this matchup.
Yeah, it looks like he's a lot happier with this, being able to. And we're going to see what Corey has. Looks like an Ancient Tomb, so he does have a Soul Land into a Chalice of the Void on turn 1. So that's gonna eat a Force of Will from Jacob Oakley, as having that mana creature, being able to come counter that would be very difficult to overcome.
Yeah.
It looks like we're going to have a fetch out of Jacob. We'll see what he.
I think he has a Noble Hierarch. Probably going to go for a trop here, and he does.
Yeah, so he's going to get the trop and then play a
Should
turn
be at
1 mana
18
creature.
from before his pitch. And then Corey is at 18 from the Ancient Tomb activation. I think this is maybe a Noble Hierarch. It is a Noble. And I want to say he still has a Daze remaining in his hand. So if Corey does something like land, pedal, sneak attack, it's gonna be
Looks like I
crazy.
do see a Scrubland, possibly in a Wasteland. And that third card is possible. It looks like a Trinisphere going to try to come down for Corey. We'll see if Jacob has any answer for that. Is that?
Now, here's oddly, he has enough lands. Maybe you might want to leave him on this. You're going to be able to pay 3 for your next spell anyways.
Yeah, and it looks like that's what Jacob decided to do. He's going to go ahead and
Jacob may even just try to screw Corey out of the game.
that looks like a line. He's going to wasteland the Ancient Tomb, leaving Corey just on 1 mana. And with him having the mana creature in play, I mean, it can attack because of the Exalted trigger, the Noble Hierarch. He's putting Corey under a lot of pressure to find an answer.
Yeah, Corey will be in a good spot though if he has another soul land. But if he has a bunch of petals, then he's not going to be able to do too much. And even if he does have a soul land, I don't think he can put anything too problematic on the table, other than Blood Moon, right? Or like
Yeah,
additional copies of the Trinisphere, maybe.
yeah. Blood Moons would be the worst, but even then, I mean, Jacob Oakley does have the Noble Hierarch already in play, so I mean, he does have the ability to cast some of his spells, and if he can cast, another Noble or Deathrite, but with that in play, it looks like we're gonna have a Chalice of the Void come down on 1, I believe.
Should resolve too. There's no way Jake can pay for any of the spells he would use.
So that will stop the cantrips and a lot of the other mana creatures, which is relevant with a Trinisphere in play.
Vendilion Cloak's a really good one though.
Yeah, it gives Jacob a chance to see what Corey's got going on in his hand, plus gives him a relevant threat. Looks like he's looking at a sneak attack, mountain, a simian spirit guide, and a world spine worm.
I think you definitely want to take his. I would take the sneak attack here probably.
I think I'm in agreement with that because world spine worm doesn't do anything without sneak attack.
There could be less. I think there's more creatures though than there are additional sneak attacks. So like if you take the creature, he has more ways to draw it. He has more other creatures to draw. But if you take the sneak attack, this creature's more likely. Like he only has more sneak attacks as possible draws. So I think it was wrong there to take the spine.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Jacob was thinking there. Maybe he was afraid that, of a through the breach possibly. I mean,
Yeah, through the breach is actually
that could
relevant, and I forgot about that.
that could be the only thing he could have been thinking of with having that soul land in play. I mean, he's, being like 1 soul land away from being casted through the breach if he draws it. So
Yeah, how? Yeah, I still think there's more creatures than there are effects to put them in, because there should just be 4 and 4, and then there's at least 4 Emrakul and 4 Grizzlebrand, I would think.
it looks like Corey's going to go ahead and tap that City of Traders for mana and then play a mountain, allowing him to cast that sneak attack that Jacob saw in his hand. No mana for an activation right now, and no creature from what we saw. So we'll see if Corey can draw a threat to go with that sneak attack.
Now in Jacob's spot, it would be really sweet. I think if he has 1 Jason in his main, if he just untapped through a land, played Jason, started fate sealing.
Yeah, that would be a very good draw.
He has no main deck answers to the sneak attack once it's in play, unfortunately. No Council's Judgments or Vindicates or anything hanging out in the deck. So unfortunately, the sneak attack is here to stay.
And if you're in Corey's spot, you're really just looking to draw a threat here. I mean, an Inferno Titan would be probably devastating right now, considering it would take out the only 2 creatures on Jacob's board and give him a relevant threat.
I think Jacob has a swords in hand. I thought I remember seeing one of those. So something like a worm coil engine is not going to do it. Well,
And there is the
there's the one of.
Jace.
I was mostly joking about it.
from Jacob Oakley.
So
We'll see if he decides to brainstorm or if he's just going to go straight to fate sealing and make sure that Corey does not draw that threat he needs. It looks like he's going to brainstorm.
yeah, brainstorming can help him add to his clock. I would have preferred the fate seal because if there is a creature obviously on top of Corey's deck, you would really want to clear that off the top.
And likewise, if there's not a creature, then it's really not even relevant in this situation.
Yeah,
so you can just leave it, and you
easily
know
leave
that
it.
he's not drawing anything that's going to kill you. So,
But this way does, he was able to find a Stoneforge Mystic off that brainstorm, which can potentially add to the clock and give Corey a lot less outs. Corey is at 11. We do apologize a little bit for the life total discrepancies, but you can see them obviously in the field of play anyways.
and it looks like Corey's going to play a Simian Spirit Guide and play a Blood Moon, which is going to completely shut Jacob off of mana. With the exception of that Noble Hierarch for colored mana. So he's just going to have a bunch of mountains in play. But with having a Jace and a Vendilion click in play already, he's pretty much ahead on board.
Blood Moon doesn't seem to matter at all.
Seems like it's going to be a little late. Now, if he could find a way to deal with the board, then that Blood Moon is going to lock him out of this game.
Yeah, if he found an Inferno Titan, but even then I think Jacob should be able to play a Stoneforge Mystic here, and then I believe Inferno Titan's it's just a bolt when it enters. So, well, I guess he would be able to attack and move the board. Inferno Titan would be very good here. That should cost 3. But.
And it looks like Jacob is going to cast that Stoneforge Mystic. It looks like he did cast that for, he...
Grabbing a sword?
Yeah, it looks like he's going to need to tap that Noble Hierarch.
No, he already tapped 3 lands. He had 2 lands tapped, and then Corey reminded him you're going to need to tap the 3rd.
Well, those are mountains right now. They're not colored sources, so he needs to tap the Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, we could remind him, but
it looks like they didn't catch that or either forgot about the Blood Moon.
I don't think it's relevant enough.
I mean, it's not like he couldn't cast it. He does have a Noble Hierarch, so, I mean, that can come down, but...
Yeah, Corey's... I mean, this is one of those where...
And it looks like we're going to have an activation, and it is an Inferno Titan, so we will see what Corey decides to do with the 3 damage from that Inferno Titan.
He's going to be able to attack and get even more, though.
Exactly. So it looks like, first off, we're going to hit the Vendilion click, the Noble Hierarch, and do 1 damage to the Jace, and then we're going to get that attack in, and we'll see what he decides to do with the rest of the damage from the attack.
Inferno Titan was the best creature he could have drawn. I guess Grizzlebrand would have been pretty good, but even then...
Inferno Titan, Emrakul would have, the Annihilator trigger could have wiped a lot out, but then, Jacob does have the choice of what he takes. So, looks like he's going to take out that Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, that's going to set...
And the...
Now, if this happens, Jacob, if he grabs the sword, he's in a lot of trouble, because he will not be able to cast, or he has a Batterskull in hand. So he won't be able to cast the Batterskull, but he can't actually play anything else.
With only mountains in play.
He can't do that.
Yeah, there's a Blood Moon and a Chalice on one, so...
That should be in his hand.
Yeah.
Hold on. They should definitely call a judge about that, because he can't actually cast that.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's going to cast the sword.
So he's going to cast the Sword of Fire and Ice, needing a creature.
He does have the Batterskull in his hand, though. I'm pretty sure that's...
So if he can find another land and get that Batterskull into play, then he might have 1 out into winning this game. He can equip the sword the following turn and start beating down with a Germ token.
Should be lethal if he's able to... So I think it comes down to Corey now has to have another draw step.
Yeah, so it looks like Jacob's going to play the Batterskull, and we're going to have to see if Corey can hit another threat.
Yeah. Because if not, he's going to throw the sword on the Germ.
And that'll be 6 damage plus the damage from the sword will be 8, so that will be lethal.
And something like a Simian Spirit Guide could not block because rock red, if that was the thing.
Yes, that's. And it looks like he did find the Gristle brand.
Now,
So it looks like he's going to go ahead and attack first before he draws.
We can't draw. He's actually playing a huge risk here by.
Yeah, so he's going to go ahead and swing going up to 14 and then drawing 7 going back to 7.
Yeah, so he's still. If he had not drawn there, he would have been out of range. But now he's back in range, so he has to have faith that he's going to hit a creature in that 7 to sneak in and block.
Yeah, because with the attack step being already passed, I mean, there's no chance of him ending the game this turn. So.
Yeah, and it can't be an Inferno Titan because that's red. It can't be a Simian Spirit Guide for the same reasons.
So he's looking to hopefully draw another Brand or possibly Wormcoil or an Emrakul. I think those are.
Or more Brand.
Or a Worldspine Worm. He does have 2 Worldspine Worms in the deck that he could sneak in and block with.
Yeah, that does it as well. Corey's moves the discards.
So he's passing the turn back to Jacob.
If he does have an Emrakul, though, it's going to be, or anything to block here, it's going to be pretty hard. Because at that point, Jake needs to bounce.
So we're going to see the sword equipped to the Germ token in an attack. And we'll see if Corey has the blocker to sneak in and block this. Otherwise, he's going to be dead. And it looks like we have a sneak attack activation.
He's pretty likely to hit the blocker,
and a Worldspine Worm.
That's a good blocker.
Which is good because not only does it kill that, but when it leaves play, it's going to leave behind dudes.
Yeah, this is going to buy him a ton of time. So early in this game, I think Jacob, if he had just been Fate Sealing with Jace, the game would have been over. But instead, he's given Corey a window to come back in and steal the game.
So we're going to see the Worldspine Worm leave and leave behind 3 worm tokens.
Yeah, and Jacob's in a spot where now he can bounce Batter's Goal, replay it next turn, and continue doing what he's doing, but Corey has bought himself so much time with these, I guess they're worms. Oh, in fact, he might just have the game right here.
Yeah, we're going to get a sneak attack activation and a Gristle brand, and Corey's going to swing for lethal. So that's game 1 going to Corey Kozlowski on the big red, mono-red sneak attack deck.
Yeah. And Jake Oakley has some things in his sideboard that he can do. He has 2 Zealous Persecutions, an Engineered Plague, 2 Surgical Extractions, a Thoughtseize, a Spell Pierce, a Flusterstorm, a Council's Judgment, a Corrosion Grip, an Abrupt Decay, a Path to Exile, a Gideon Alexander Car, a Pithing Needle, and a Containment Priest. I like the Containment Priest. Obviously, it's pretty solid. Pithing Needle can shut down Sneak Attack or Grizzlebrand, so that
which is relevant.
A consideration. Path to Exile is not very good. I would think he would want to get away from some of his swords anyways. Like most of the creatures are like Emrakul or they're Worldspine World. Corey's not going to really care too much if you're trying to swords those or Grizzlebrand. The only ones that are really, even Inferno Titan has a really savage ETB effect. The only one that's really weak to that would be Wormcoil. I also like, you can, Council's Judgment, Frozen Grip. Some of those effects can come in for Sneak Attack or Blood Moon, or also some of the artifact taxes. Spell Pierce, Flusterstorm, Thoughtseize all seem great. Surgical could be okay. It's something that, if he has room, you could bring it in, but if not, I don't think you would need it here.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at that point, you're looking to hopefully counter a Sneak Attack or counter a Blood Moon and then Surgical.
You have to stop the first one, though, and then even if you do Surgical, like if you counter Sneak Attack and then Surgical it, your opponent could turn around and through to breach something in, or just, hardcast an Inferno Titan. I mean, he has Soul Lands, Writs, and, a ton of mountains, so. And even Wormcoil you can cast too, so let's take a look at Corey's sideboard now.
And on Corey's side, we got 2 Chandra Torch of Defiance, 2 Defense Grid, 1 Fiery Confluence, 2 Ingot Chewers, 2 Kozilek's Return, 2 Magus of the Moon, 2 pyrostatic pillars, and 2 Tormod's crypt. Definitely like the Magus of the Moon here, playing that you're playing against a 4-color deck with all non-basics. Any Blood Moon effect, especially early, is going to be devastating. If you think he's going to still have counter magic, then Defense Grid can be very good as it protects you on your turn. Chandra, Torch of Defiance, can be a very good card in these mid-range matchups. Gives you another threat that can come down and easily take over a game. And possibly the Kozilek returns if you're worried about True Name Nemesis or other effects like that, or even all the mana dorks. I mean, you can easily wipe out a bunch of their creatures in one turn if they do try to overload the board. So those are some options that Corey has.
I'm thinking Corey also. I'm not really sure. Usually combo decks you don't want to board out too much to dilute your strategy, but he probably can get away from some of these, the ritual type effects, because Jacob's not something you need to race, really. I mean,
True.
He plays a really slow deck. You don't need to rid out things, and you don't even need to really turn one a Blood Moon for it to be effective. So I think you can get away from some of those. Maybe City of Traders could be poor. You could maybe shave one or two of those as well. On Jake's side, Leovold doesn't actually. It works against Grizzlebrand, but that seems a little loose. Leovold, unlike against most combo decks, is actually going to be pretty poor here, it seems like. And then some of the Swords of Plowshares, Abrupt Decays, maybe you want some of those for the creatures, and then Abrupt Decay can touch like Blood Moon and such. But if you're Abrupt Decaying a Blood Moon, I mean, you have to leave up a ton of mana and float it, and that's just a lot of work to go through.
And some other things Corey has in his sideboard that I didn't mention is Fiery Confluence and Ingot Chewer. I mean, if he really, is worried about a Batter Skull, or if he thinks he's going to get a Blood Moon down and wants ways to interact with the few things that Jacob does have that he can cast, he could always bring an Ingot Chewer or Fiery Confluence to get rid of those equipment.
Yeah. There's a lot of different ways both these players could take it.
So we'll see what they decide. Looks like they are ready for game 2. They're drawing their 7, and we'll see if they decide to keep or mulligan.
Jacob, it looks like, this is one of my concerns with Swords of Plowshares. He left, obviously, 2 in, because he has 2 in his opening hand. He has a containment priest. He's going to keep the hand, it appears. But other than the containment priest, the rest of this disruption doesn't necessarily do anything.
Looks like
he's going to be in trouble.
Looks like Corey's starting out with an Ancient Tomb into a Simian Spirit Guide into a Blood Moon on turn 1,
that might just be the match.
which could be devastating because with no turn 1 mana dork from Jacob Oakley, even if he fetches, he's playing 0 basics, so he is basically locked out of this game with no counterspell.
Yeah, he's got to find.
Looks like he's going to try to Wasteland, but that's turned off because of the Blood Moon. So.
Yeah, this game's effectively over here, and that's
yeah.
One of the problems I have with the swords is it just.
It looks like we're gonna have a Chalice on 1 come down on Corey's side.
It also gets shut off by the Chalice. Yeah, I think part of this was Jake had to. You can't keep a hand here off the back of 1 containment priest.
It looks like he's going to play a Swords, and I guess he's hoping to just draw into a Batter Skull, and hopefully there's no removal for it. So we're just seeing draw-go action going on right now as they just play mountains. Looks like Corey's up to 5 mana. Yeah, we're going to see a Through the Breach from Corey, and we'll see what he puts into play. It looks like a Worm Coil Engine.
Yeah, it's going to... 14, then this is a 4-turn clock, I think? Or no? 6? Oh, yeah.
So we're going to see an attack from the Worm Coil, putting Jacob down to 14 and Corey up to 26, and then it leaving behind the 2 3/3s, and Jacob's going to scoop, and Corey Kozlowski is going to win this match 2-0 over Jacob Oakley, the big red deck over Bant Deathblade.
I believe the winner of this gets into the top 8. This is one of the deciding rounds. This is kind of why we decided to put it on camera.
So as they're de-sideboarding, you can kind of see what they do. Zachary Cook On Infect, playing against Jeff Burton, playing Sultai Delver. Um, so this should be a very interesting match. As an Infect player myself, this matchup can be, very skill intensive. The Sultai Delver deck does have a lot of removal, has ways of interacting with not only your hand but the board. So Ink Moth Nexus becomes a big factor in these matchups, as Ink Moth can be difficult to interact with, and they do have wastelands. But in these mid-rangey, I say Jund-esque, but even though this is Sultai, but the mid-rangey kind of tempo removal decks. Ink Moth Nexus can be a very good card in those matchups. Looks like Jeff's gonna mulligan his starting hand. It looks like Zachary has decided. Zach has decided to keep. Um, so we will get this match started in just a moment. As Okay, it looks like Jeff has decided to keep and finish his scry. Looks like he kept the scry on top. Zach's going to start on turn one with a turn one Glistener Elf off of a Windswept Teeth. Go get that Tropical Island, play a Glistener Elf. This is a good start for the Infect deck, as you do want to get that early Infector down if possible. We'll see if Jeff has any ways to interact. Removal spell, maybe even discard to, get some of the pump spells out of Zach's hand. But these are the type of starts for the Infect deck that if you have an early Infector backed up with pump spells and, even a little bit of counter magic with its Force Days, even just vines to protect your guy, you can get some free wins very early with Infect. So we'll see what kind of pans out. Looks like Jeff fetched for a Underground Sea and then killed the Glistener Elf. Zach's gonna follow it up with a Brainstorm. That was a Dismember that killed the Glistener Elf, hence the loss of life from Jeff's side. Zach's going to go ahead and finish resolving that Brainstorm by fetching, getting that perfect Brainstorm. And he's going to go ahead and play another Glistener Elf off of the Tropical Island he gets, and that's going to be Dazed by Jeff as he returns that Underground Sea to his hand. Then Zach's going to pass the turn. Jeff's going to draw and then replay that Underground Sea he picked up. And he's going to play a Deathrite Shaman. So it seems like Jeff's been able to, keep the assault down and get some board presence. Zach's going to follow that up with an Ink Moth Nexus and a Noble Hierarch, which is good. Give him that Exalted trigger, give him some more mana to play with when it comes to his pump spells. or the ability to play counter magic. Jeff's going to go ahead and use that Death Right to remove a land from Zach's graveyard and play a Tarmogoyf, and then he's going to fetch down to 14 and play a Tarmogoyf. And I'm not sure. It looks like we've got land instant creature that I know of in the graveyard. I'm not sure, so it looks like it's going to be a 3/4 Tarmogoyf. Um, which won't do nothing against the Inkmoth. Then we're gonna have a Thought Seize from Jeff, and it's gonna get met by a Flusterstorm from Zach. Doesn't want to let him see that hand, see his hand, and then we're gonna see a invigorate. Activation of the Inkmoth, invigorate, and a Become Immense, which is gonna get Zach the win. That's gonna be 10 infect right off the bat and give Zachary Cuck a game 1 win over Sultai Delver. So going to sideboards, on Jeff's side, we've got 2 Diabolic Edict, 2 Dread of Night, 1 Engineered Plague, 2 Flusterstorm, 1 Graft-Digger's Cage, 1 Liliana of Last Hope, 1 Null Rod, 2 Surgical Extractions, 2 Toxic Deluge, and an Umezawa's Jitte. He's got a lot of options here. Umezawa's Jitte is always a very good card against Infect, as if you can get counters on it, not only is it something that pumps your threats and makes them very, very deadly as lethal attackers, but you can interact with the -1/-1 counters to get the Infect creatures off the board. Gives you a way to interact with Glistener Elf, gives you a way to interact with Inkmoth Nexus without putting too much in on the attack phase, because interacting with Infect in an attack step is very dangerous, because they do have cards like Vines of Asswood that allow them to not only protect their own creatures but make them bigger. So you get in a very, very risky game trying to interact with Infect on their attack step. But that's one way to do it without really committing too much. And it's like if they, because in response you've got 2 counters. The Dread of Nights won't see play here. Engineered Plague possibly is a way to kill maybe a Glistener Elf or a Blighted Agent. Flusterstorms could come in as just ways to win counter wars. Liliana of Last Hope, being that a lot of the tough creatures have 1 toughness in Zach's deck, Liliana of Last Hope can not only knock out a bunch of creatures, but give you a win condition. So that I could easily see that coming in. And Diabolic Edict is another card that, being that it's, a lot of times the Infect deck's not going to have a ton of creatures in play. It's usually going to have 1, possibly 2. I mean, a lot of times they'll have their 1 Infect guy, and then you can Edict them and get that off the board. So that's another possibility. On Zach's side, we've got 1 Pithing Needle, 1 Force of Will, 1 Flusterstorm, a Spell Pierce, a Graft-Digger's Cage, a Sylvan Safekeeper, a Dissenter's Deliverance, a Nature's Claim, 2 Submerge, a Blue Elemental Blast, a Hydra Blast, a Teferi's Response, a Jacevin's Prodigy, and a Spell Snare. So on Zach's side, a lot of interesting cards here. You got Flusterstorm and Spell Pierce if you think that, counter magic is going to play a big part in this. You got an extra Force of Will. Generally, that's not going to be, that's probably sort of, he's going to look to probably side out as his card disadvantage. The Submerges can be good in this matchup as they can, bounce get rid of a Delver or a Tarmogoyf. The Hydra Blast and the Blue Elemental Blast are not going to be too big in this matchup. Actually, not at all, because they're not playing red. Teferi's Response, if he thinks he might have some number of Wastelands and Wasteland type effects, then Teferi's response, you could see, is it was a way to not only counter the Wasteland, but draw a bunch of cards, protect your own stuff. And then cards like Jacevin's Prodigy and Spell Snare, I mean, just more counter magic. And Spell Snare and Jace, in a long, grindy game, can get you card advantage, can flip to bring back a pump spell, different things like that. So, a lot of options on both sides. So we'll see how they decide to sideboard, as it does look like they're getting ready for game 2. They're just shuffling up and drawing their hands. So now I talked about what they could side in. As far as things to side out, I mean, on Jeff's side, Leovold in a matchup like this, Zach doesn't have really a lot of stuff that's going to target his creature. So I mean that thing's kind of diminished. He does have cantrips and brainstorm, so you do get that effect to stop him from kind of drawing into his pump spells or finding counter magic when he needs it. But also in a matchup like this, Leovold could just be slow. So because these infect decks can be very, very fast. The dismembers, are another cards. I mean, if you worry about your life total a little bit, but then again, infect's not really attacking you at your life total. So we'll see what they decide. Looks like we're underway, and we've got a Bayou followed by a turn 1 Thought Seize from Jeff, and he sees a Blighted Agent, a Brainstorm, a Flusterstorm, a Pendlehaven, a Wooded Foothills, and a Noble Hierarch. So a good hand from Zach. He's got mana, he's got counter magic, he's got a cantrip in the form of Brainstorm that can, filter that hand out, and a Noble Hierarch on turn 1. Can't tell what that is that was necessarily taken. A little glare on the screen, but looks like we're going to have a turn 1 Pendlehaven followed by a Noble Hierarch for Zach. So getting that Mana Accelerant down on turn 1 can really help the Infect deck, as it can allow it to get out quicker. It can play its, it can play its Infector on, turn 2 and still have protection for it in the form of counter magic or vines. Looks like Jeff's going to play a Deathrite Shaman and miss a land drop, though, so that could be big. It seems like Jeff's a little mana screwed right now. He's going to need to find land, and quickly, because given enough time, this Infect deck will piece a kill together, and if you don't have mana, not only are you going to be far, far behind on board, but you're going to have no way of interacting with them. It looks like Zach's going to fetch with a Wooded Foothills and going to drop and submerge that Deathrite Shaman. It looks like Jeff's deciding whether he wants to respond with it, and doesn't look like it, so that's just going to get put on top of his deck. So he will be drawing that next turn. And we're going to see Noble Heart tap for a blue, and that Pendlehaven tap and play a Blighted Agent. So Zach's got a good start going. He dealt with the Deathrite Shaman. He's got an Infector out. It's got plenty of mana. So it looks like Jeff's just going to draw that Deathrite and replay it. So we'll see if he has, shields are kind of down. So we'll see what happens on this turn. See if Zach has enough for a kill. Looks like he's still looking for pump spells, so he's going to Brainstorm. We'll see what the Brainstorm finds. And just sitting on board right now, Zach does have 3 damage if he wants it with the Pendlehaven activation and the Exalted Trigger from the Noble Hierarch. He's going to play a land. He's going to pump with Pendlehaven and attack with that trigger. He's going to get 3 infect damage in. And it looks like an Inkmoth Nexus was the land that he played. So Looks like that Deathrite Shaman's going to eat a land, and then Abrupt Decay is going to hit that Blighted Agent. Um, he's just going to pass the turn back to Zach. Zach's going to tap that double Heart for a blue and Brainstorm. Probably looking for just pump spells, Invigorate Berserk. If he's got that right now, I mean, that's just lethal. Even a Become Immense right here. Looks like he's gonna play another Ink Moth activate. Looks like he's gonna just do the 2 infect damage and then use that Pendle Haven and to play another Blighted Agent. So Zach is way ahead on board. And at this point, I mean, even with Jeff being so far behind, he doesn't even necessarily have to just kill him instantly. I mean, with the 2 Ink Moss in play and the Blighted Agent, I mean, he can play this. He's got the Pendle Haven and the Noble, so he's got a pretty quick clock even without pump spells. And he can just make sure he can protect these guys. And so it looks like he's going to activate both Ink Moss, swing, and go for 4 damage here with the Pendle Haven activation. Jeff attempts to Fatal Push, but that gets met with a Flusterstorm. So Jeff's at 9 poison right now with a Blighted Agent and 2 Ink Moss in play, and yeah, he drew no land. So Zach's gonna take this match 2-0 to win this quarterfinal in our top 8 of the Alabama Legacy IQ here at JC's House of Cards. As a D sideboard, it looks like the Jace did come in, the Spell Snare, a Flusterstorm, a Submerge, and a Pithing Needle all came in for Zach.
Alrighty, everybody. We are shuffling up for the finals at the Alabama Legacy League. IQ number 4, I believe this is. My name is Robert Storch, and I will be doing the commentary for this. So we've got Zachary Cock, who's not on Jeskai Delver. Whoops, I apologize. Let me fix that. He is on Infect against Andrew Mays, who is on Esper Delver, which should prove for a exciting and interesting match here. And they are currently checking deck lists as they have them on hand, trying to get an idea of what they're both looking out for from the other player. And I unfortunately do not have deck lists in front of me, so I'll have to make do with my vast knowledge of Magic as to guess what they're going to be doing. So here they are, they're shuffling up. And I do not know who is going to be going first, but I'm sure we'll be able to find that out in just a little bit. Zachary Cock over there on the left is coming into play in this, hot off of his second place finish at the Legacy Classic in Louisville just recently. He was piloting Infect on that as well, and just barely missed out on winning in the finals. It would seem he had slightly misboarded against, I believe it was Jund Depths. But as someone who was there watching that match, it was exciting, and Zach always puts on a good show. Andrew Mays is one of the regulars up here at the Alabama Legacy League, brought to you by MTG Training Grounds, and he always comes with a new exciting deck. I don't think I've ever seen him play the same deck twice, except for the first couple times I saw him play. He was always on some version of a Bug Brew. Last time I played against him, he was on Black Red Reanimator, but today he is on Esper Delver, which one might consider why go Esper Delver, but I think the printing of Fatal Push gives you some good reasons to go with Esper on that. So our players are drawing their starting 7, and we're about to get going with our finals matches. Alrighty. You can see a little bit of Andrew's hand, but not quite well. And Andrew is dissatisfied with his 7, so he's mulliganing down to 6. Zachary, on the other hand, seems to be quite satisfied with what he has. Now, on Andrew's side, this definitely is going to affect uh, his game plan going forward, as an infect keeping a 7 obviously means they definitely are on the game plan they want to be. They've got most likely an infect creature, or bare minimum a noble hierarch, to be able to ponder and or brainstorm into an infect creature. And so Zach's already got a slight front foot forward from a tempo standpoint. Andrew's probably going to be hoping to find a 6 with some removal, and that may be why he mulliganed his 7, was because he felt with no removal he didn't want to risk having to try and ponder or brainstorm into it, and then suddenly run into a plethora of counterspells from Zach or a quick combo kill. In fact, it is quite dangerous from that aspect, as Invigorate is a powerful spell just because by simple virtue of being a completely free spell. So here we go. Andrew is drawing his 6. Taking a look at it, looks like he's got a ponder over there. Probably land he is keeping, and he is going for a scry. And Zach begins turn 1. Tropical Island and a Noble Hierarch. Definitely where you want to be, and in fact gets you ahead on mana. And the Exalted triggers from Noble Hierarch are very, very powerful. Andrew's going to go down to 19, fetch up an Underground Sea, and we'll see what he does next. He plays a very altered card that I am not entirely sure about. I believe that it's supposed to be a Delver of Secrets. Zach opens up with a Ponder on his next turn. That's got to be an Altered Delver. I'm like 99% sure about it. Alright. Keeps, draws Wooded Foothills, plays it, taps Noble Hierarch, casts a Brainstorm. Drawing his 3. There's a Glistener Elf in there, and I didn't see the other 2 cards. So we'll have to wait for a second for Zach to put 2 back on Brainstorm. So it's very probable he is currently looking for an infect creature, which we know he found found a Glistener Elf. So more than likely he'll put the 2 cards he doesn't want away, fetch up with that Wooded Foothills, and cast that Glistener Elf so he can get ready to start swinging in for some poison damage, get that infect counter rolling on up. Zach thinks he's got the 2 he wants to put back, not entirely sure. Could be posturing, that's always fun to do. Simply try and make them think that you don't have exactly what you need to completely crush them, but, just play it safe. Andrew is waiting patiently. Alright, Zach goes, fetches up, plays Glistener Elf like I was thinking, and passes the turn back. And as you can see, Zach has some very nicely altered tropical islands. Zach has very good taste in alters, I would say. He's picks out the artworks and picks out the designs pretty well, so makes for a very nice looking deck. Andrew draws, starts the second turn. He's got a land in hand, a couple blue cards. Looks like possibly a Force of Will in there. Let's see what Andrew does. So Delver did not flip. No, that is not a Delver. That is a Deathrite Shaman, actually. Probably, maybe. I think that's a Deathrite Shaman. The one downside of altars is you can't quite tell what they are. Regardless, Andrew has cast the Ponder, taking a look at his top 3, trying to see if he wants one or all of them, or if he would rather shuffle and get a completely different card that is not hopefully one of those 3. Andrew is choosing to shuffle. Didn't like his 3, obviously digging for something in particular. If he's not comfortable with having, the removal spell, or wants additional removal spells to deal with that Glistener Elf, it's definitely where he wants to be, as the Glistener Elf does represent quite a, that threat, that poison infect threat for Andrew to deal with. And sure, while he most certainly could be blocking with Deathrite Shaman Then Zack untaps. It's pretty unideal with that exalted trigger off the noble hierarch, as it's not any kind of clean trade or any advantageous trade. It's just a chump blocker. You'd rather not be chump blocking, especially on a little infect 1/1. Andrew's still in some indecision. He's all right. He is exiling with Deathrite Shaman and casting a Delver of Secrets. Exiled the Wooded Foothills from Zack's graveyard. Plays an Underground Sea, and I believe he has passed the turn back now. Yeah, it's all right. Zack untaps, draws for turn, and tapping Noble Hierarch, and begins with a Brainstorm. So second Brainstorm out of Zack's deck. And the real question here is whether or not Zack has a fetch land to put some other cards away and shuffle them away, or if he's going to Brainstorm lock himself off of this. If he has a Ponder, he can also shuffle with that, and that's a very powerful tool as well. Puts his 2 back, and Wasteland Andrew's untapped Underground Sea. He responds by casting Brainstorm. So what's really important to note here is this means that Andrew is not going to attempt to use any sort of removal spells on the Glistener Elf. So if Zack attempts any sort of combo kill here, Andrew cannot use a removal spell. He will have to rely solely on counter magic to survive. And it looks like we've got an Invigorate on the Glistener Elf. So that would put Andrew at 24. Or excuse me, 25. And that is the combo kill right there. Double Invigorate plus, which is +4, then +4/+4 again, plus the 1/1 already, the 1/1 from the Exalted trigger, and that is the turn 3 infect combo kill, folks. Andrew definitely needs to dig deeper for some counter spells and the removal, but was unable to find it. And so now they are going to be getting out some deck lists, taking a look at what they're going to need to be worried about at the sideboards, and move on from there. Now I don't know what entirely exactly what Andrew's got in his list, but I would imagine he probably has a couple of wastelands. And he'll definitely want to have those at the ready for Blinkmoth Nexus. If he has any additional removal, he'll also want to be bringing that in. Having access to black means he may have access to some discard spells, which aren't the worst, but I won't contend that they're any level of amazing. Probably, probably for Zack, I would imagine, he brings in various cards. If he is expecting the Wasteland out of Andrew Mays, he may go for one of the cards he had in that classic, which was Teferi's Response. That proved to be a very powerful card in that. I'd also imagine with Deathrite Shaman, he'll consider bringing Pithing Needle as being able to shut off the Deathrite Shaman and cut Andrew off to those extra sources of mana. It's very powerful. Both players are absolutely going to be bringing in whatever copies of Flusterstorm they have, as counter magic is at a premium when you're trying to defend, your combo creatures, and when you're trying to stop your opponent from comboing you out on Infect. Another card Andrew may have access to and consider bringing in is Submerge, as it's not an amazing spell at times from the standpoint of it's not any sort of permanent solution to Zack's Infectors. But a free spell is a free spell, and the kind of tempo advantage he can gain from that as the tempo deck of Delver, okay, just extremely important to note here. Zach played Sylvan Library in the sideboard at the Classic, and so if he's doing running that back today, I would absolutely imagine he would be bringing that in as having the access to the card selection, and if he's willing to pay the life, the card advantage of it is extremely important to note. Alrighty, apologies for the awkward silence there. I took a moment to take a picture of their deck list real fast so I can better discuss what they're doing over here. So let's talk a bit more about Andrew's Esper Delver. So he is running a lot of things in this. So he is running the four wastelands, and he's got two tundras, a scrubland, and one tropical island. So since he's got the Deathrite shamans, he is splashing green, and so he has one abrupt decay. And abrupt decay is really interesting against Zach's deck because on the one hand it is uncounterable and will absolutely stop a Glistener Elf and or Blighted Agent, but it's extremely miserable against Inkmoth Nexus as it's only non-land permanents. Uh, Andrew's threat suite consists of, your four Death Threats, your four Delvers, and since he's got the white for Esper, he's got four Stoneforge Mystics, and he rounds it out with two True Name Nemesis and two Gurmag Anglers. His removal suite consists of three Fatal Push and a Path to Exile, and then the aforementioned Abrupt Decay. Path to Exile is interesting against Zach's deck because while some decks like Grixis Delver don't run any basics, so it's a complete advantage for Andrew, Zach runs, basic forest as a one of, and he can go fetch that up. So coming out of Andrew's sideboard, I would expect two Flusterstorms, two Zealous Persecution. Probably won't do the Containment Priest, possibly the Meddling Mage, depending on how he feels about it. There is an Abrupt Decay, and while it could be less than a stellar, probably won't bring it in. The really interesting one of that I'd be interested to see if he decides to bring in is Liliana the Last Hope. While you don't really want to tap out too often against Infect, the advantage and pressure that Liliana puts on his Zach is extremely powerful. And on Zach's side, he'll bring in his fourth Force of Will as it's not main deck, Flusterstorm, a Spell Pierce. Sylvan Safekeeper, I'd be expecting him to bring in as being able to sack a land to provide Shroud to his creatures is very powerful. And then he would also likely bring in the Teferi's Response. Another interesting card he might bring is Jace Vryn's Prodigy, which is an interesting card for him to have, but facing down Delver, I'd say it's quite something he's interested in as the flip. Jace will flip quickly, and being able to plus up on Delver just buys Zach so much time to accumulate exactly what he needs. Flashing back Ponders and Brainstorms is just actual card advantage because casting the card from your graveyard and then drawing one is just you draw one card, but being able to select the cards you put in your hand is extremely powerful. So I'll definitely expect to be bringing those in, and we'll have to see what comes in just a little bit. Andrew is definitely going to be hoping to land a early Stoneforge Mystic, get the Umezawa's Jite, and hopefully start connecting with it as that gives him so much control over the board and what creatures Zach has, as Jite can simply tick down and remove Zach's threats. So Andrew's going to open on an Underground Sea followed by a Ponder and start looking at the top three cards he has. decides to shuffle them as he's unhappy with what he's got going on over there. Alrighty. So Andrew passed the turn back. Zach opens with a fetch, a ponder, putting his life total at 19 now. Taking a look at what he got, it looks like he's got two brainstorms and an unknown card. Decides to shuffle away. It's not what he's looking for, not what he really wants and needs right now. So he'll likely pass the turn back after he draws his card. And Andrew goes to untaps, takes his turn too. Decides to fetch, goes down to 19. Fetches up a Tundra. Taps, is this a Stoneforge coming? Yes, it is. Now he's going back into his library. Probably get a Jitte. Nope, he goes for the Batterskull. So it looks like Andrew is very much interested in putting a strong clock on Zach. Most likely due to the fact that Zach did not play a threat on turn one, which means that Andrew's in good shape as far as being able to put that quick clock on Zach and put the need for him to put aggression. Zach untaps and immediately puts out a Blighted Agent, which gets dazed by Andrew. That's exactly where Andrew wants to be. He's tempoing Zach out. He's got the Batterskull in hand, so he can end a turn, put it into the battlefield with Stoneforge Mystic. But Zach still has that Inkmoth Nexus, and that's not irrelevant. The flying creature land is quite the threat. Now he has a second one, swinging in with the Inkmoth Nexus. And that puts Andrew at 1 infect. And see if Zach passes the turn back. He does not. He's going to play out Pithing Needle. More than likely naming Stoneforge. And Andrew is going to respond by putting in the Batterskull. So Andrew is going to untap, draw. Looks like he drew a true name off of that, and he has a Delver in hand. Got an Underground Sea in hand as well. Be swinging in for 4 in a second with the... no, he's swinging in for 5. So he's swinging for 5 against Zach. It's going to move Zach down to 14. And then Andrew is going to gain 4 life, putting him in at 23. And obviously they only have 20-sided dice on there, so Andrew's dice is going to say 20, but I have typed in 23, so we should be in good shape. And then he passes the turn back to Zach. Untaps and he draws. Leads off with a Brainstorm. Digging for some cards. Noble Hierarch, Misty Rainforest, and Glistener Elf are the draws off the Brainstorms. Deciding what 2 cards he wants to put back. He knows he needs to present, a dangerous threat to Andrew that he feels like he has to start using removal or something. Zach fetches, goes down to 13, gets a second Tropical Island. We'll see what he plays next. And possibly a Noble Hierarch is what I would venture out. Alright, so nope, just swings in with Inkmoth Nexus. putting Andrew at 2 infect counters, and then Zach passes the turn back. And then at the end of turn, Andrew fatal pushes the Inkmoth Nexus. So Andrew's where he wants to be. He's removed a threat. He's only at 2 infect. He's got about a 3-turn clock on Zach right now, although he may increase that relatively soon. Zach is tapping onto round C and is casting a Brainstorm, trying to filter out his hand, shape it up to be himself in a position where he can completely close the door on Zach this game and move on to a game 3, so he can try and win the Alabama Legacy League finals. All right, put his 2 back, plays a Polluted Delta, swings in for 5 again against Zach, putting Zach to 8. And then Andrew is now at 27. And he passes turn back. Zach draws. He'll likely activate Inkmoth Nexus and attack again. Question is, what else is going to do? He needs some pump spells to end this for Andrew, but he also needs counter magic to defend that. An Invigorate followed by a Berserk with some double force backup or something along those lines. Probably be his best situation, but still. So he leads off with a Noble Hierarch and he plays another third Inkmoth Nexus, which is really strong place. Activates the Inkmoth, swings in for 2 with the Exalted, and Andrew goes up to 4 Infect. And decides to play a Glistener Elf. So look, he's trying to go for a threat density at this point, and Andrew dazes it by tapping 2 mana. So he's got a Force of Will, a True Name Nemesis. Alright, swings in for 5, putting Zach to 3. Andrew is now at 31. And he just passes the turn back. Andrew's in a pretty good position. He can be extremely reactive. He's got Zach dead on board next turn, so Zach is going to have to come up with some pump spells to be able to finish off Andrew this game. A single Invigorate would do it. Become Immense would do it. Berserk would not do it. So let's see what Zach decides to go for. Trying to decide which land to activate Inkmoth Nexus with. Use the Inkmoth Nexus, swinging in, Exalted Trigger. Right, and Andrew is up to 6 Infect now. So Zach did not go for the Infect kill. He is fetching, going down to 2. Shame Andrew doesn't have access to red, as Zach is easily in multiple range. And Zach is tapping 4 mana, casting Green Sun Zenith. Andrew is going to Spell Pierce it. Zach will accept the Spell Pierce, and I think that leaves Zach dead on board now. Yep, packs it up. Zach was going to Green Sun Zenith for Viridian Corruptor. That would allow him to kill the Batterskull and then have an additional threat as well as blocker against the Stoneforge Mystic. But Spell Pierce makes it easy. And even if Zach had counter magic, we saw already that Andrew had the Force and probably a blue card, possibly a Delver. So our players are going on to game 3, shuffling on up, and we will see who wins today's Alabama Legacy League IQ. And players are reconsulting their sideboards, taking a look at those things again. And definitely I don't think we saw anything major from Andrew out of the sideboard. Whereas with Zach, we saw the Pithing Needle. Unfortunately, he was not able to get that out before Stoneforge was able to activate and put in that Batterskull. But it prevented Andrew from putting anything else out. If he had a Sword of Fire and Ice in hand, that wasn't coming out for free. He would have had to pay full price for that. Unfortunately for Zach, his Hydroblast and Red Elemental Blast aren't exactly at their best here against Andrew's deck, as he's not playing red, which is one consideration to playing something like Esper Delver, as that your opponents can't just bring in Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast to stop your counter spells, or they can't bring in those Hydroblast and Blue Elemental Blast. The issue is, when they bring in the Pyroblast and the Red Elemental Blast, you're sort of at the disadvantage. Um, the other curiosity is what cards that cut. I would imagine that he probably has shifted the Gataxian probes out, as they're not exactly at their greatest here. Because while they're powerful at being able to clear the way, at the end of the day, he's really just looking to uh, properly tempo Andrew out, or just combo kill him. So yeah, he's looking at his sideboard. We see the Green Sun Zenith is still in there. We see the Pithing Needle still in there. Andrew is satisfied with his sideboard and is currently shuffling on up. An interesting thing about Zach's deck is he was only playing one Pendelhaven today, not playing two. And then he has the one of Wasteland in there, which will have its uses. And Zach is finished shuffling up and is presented to Andrew. Andrew is now presenting to Zach, and about to get ready for our game 3. So to those who are just possibly tuning in, this is welcome to MTG Training Grounds, Alabama Legacy League. We are in Huntsville, Alabama at JC's House of Cards, going into game 3 with Zachary Koch and Andrew Mays. Zach is on Infect today, and he was able to get a very quick game 1 with Glistener Elf, pumped by Noble Hierarch, and then double Invigorate. And then Andrew got a game 2 with the 2-2 Stoneforge, followed by Batterskull, and then just the right amount of disruption and removal to keep Zach from doing anything extremely relevant. And so Zach is more than likely going to be taking the play. Andrew will be drawing first, and Andrew seems to be unhappy with his opening 7. Not the right mix of removal, a threat, and counter magic that he was looking for. And we don't see Zach mulliganing here. Interesting to note, Zach has not mulliganed this entire match, so he seems to be pretty happy with his 7 each game so far, although his game 2 7 didn't seem to pan out quite how he was hoping. The Ponders and Brainstorms just weren't finding the cards he was looking for, and sometimes that happens. As much library manipulation as you get sometimes, and get here in Legacy, it's sometimes just not enough for you to have exactly what you want when you want it. And that's just part of the variance of Magic, folks. So Andrew has finished shuffling and getting out his 6, although I think he accidentally got out 7. Hopefully, I expect our players will catch that in just a second. And he has realized that there is a 7th card rather than only 6 cards, so he is putting that 7th card back on top of the library. We'll be taking a look at them in a moment and seeing if it's a keepable 6 to start the game 3. Despite being down the card, since he'll be drawing a card on that first turn, Andrew won't be in a severe disadvantage from a card advantage standpoint. Zach seems to have a Glistener Elf and a land at the very least in his hand. Andrew's got a Force of Will, a Tundra, a couple other blue cards that I can't quite tell what they are. And he's looking long and hard at it. Doesn't seem like it's a very promising 6, but I don't think he really wants to go down to 5. And he keeps it, scries, bottoms that scry pretty quickly. Not what he's looking for. And Zach is going to open us off with a Forest and a Glistener Elf, putting the pressure on immediately. And he's still got a Green Sun in hand, and Andrew is going to force pitching Brainstorm. So right off the bat, This is going to let Zach know that Andrew's hand is not particularly strong and that even something like that is good. And Zach will force back, pitching a brainstorm as well. So both our players are at 19 now. Andrew's going to play a Tundra and pass. Zach will untap, swing in for one, get that one infect in, and he is looking to be exactly where he wants to be. Does not play a second land. Andrew is going to play a polluted Delta. Crack it. It's going to go down to 18 now. And what land is he going to be getting up? Probably an Underground Sea. Yes, is what he's going to go for. And there comes the Stoneforge Mystic. And what will he be getting? I would imagine GT is probably his best thing here if he has it. He is thinking long and hard about what he wants. He has GTA Battle Skull, and if he brought in the Sword of Fire and Ice, he has that. Although Sword of Fire and Ice is kind of medium here, but the 2 damage is the most relevant clause on it. You know, dealing damage to a player, and then that is relevant. But GTA is just strictly better as it's all damage. And there he goes, pulls out the GTA. Zach is asking if it is can untap, if Andrew's going to be doing anything else on his turn. And so Zach is incentivized to try and quickly finish off Andrew before that Jitte is on the battlefield and he's attacking with it. That poses a serious problem for him. And also Zach cannot readily attack into the Stoneforge right now unless he has some sort of pump for the Glistener Elf. And he plays a Tropical Island, casts a Ponder. Looking at the top 3, we got a Blighted Agent, we have a Invigorate, and I did not see that last card. And Invigorate's powerful here as being able to remove the Stoneforge and make Andrew have to cast the Jitte without a creature on the battlefield and actually cast it where it can be countered is extremely relevant. So Zach will probably keep these 3 on top and then figure out what order he wants to draw them and which third card he might possibly decide to shuffle away. And he draws, swings in, and Andrew elects to not block, fearing the Invigorate, and he moves up to 2 Infect. Andrew has taking his turn, is drawn, is having to figure out from where in this position can he navigate to any sort of victory against Zach. And he is elected to just pass the turn. No third land coming in from Andrew. And Zach is going to begin his turn by casting another Ponder. Take a look at his top 3. He's got a Noble Hierarch in there, and I didn't quite catch the other cards, but I believe there was a Blighted Agent in there. Takes a look at his hand, trying to piece together how he's going to achieve a victory here. If he has no pumps, Andrew can block the Glistener Elf and then, before damage, put in the Jitte and then successfully block the Glistener Elf. And even if Zach removes it, the Stoneforge Mystic will be Stoneforge Mystic will be able, the Jitte will already be in play, and then Andrew will simply have to cast a creature to get going. More than likely, Andrew's just going to elect to not block. Zach is dissatisfied with his Ponder and is choosing to shuffle. So what Andrew's most likely on right now is possibly hopefully having counter magic to stop the combo, and is planning to just get that Jitte on the Stoneforge, swing in with the Stoneforge, start getting those counters going. Zach is swinging with the Glistener Elf, probably deciding if he wants to do some pumps. and elects not to, putting Andrew at 3 in fact. Andrew is going to activate, put in the Jitte. He untaps. Spell Snare in hand for Zach, as well as an Invigorate. And he's going to equip the Jitte and swing in. Zach takes 1, goes down to 18, and now we've got 2 counters on top of Umezawa's Jitte. And this gives Andrew a lot of power over how the battlefield will be now. And he immediately negs 1 and removes the Glistener's Elf. So from here on out, Zach's ability to win is looking extremely bad right now. We're going to see a Windswept Heath from Zach. And a passing of the turn. This is not looking good for Zach, as Andrew is just going to get lots of counters on that Umezawa's Jitte. His best scenario right now is going to be finding his Dissenter's Deliverance for that Jitte. And before damage, Andrew's going to pump the Stoneforge Mystic. That puts Zach actually at 15. And Andrew is casting a True Name Nemesis, and in response, Zach is going to daze it. And passes back the turn to Zach. And Zach simply just passes right back to Andrew. Untaps, swings in with the Stoneforge Mystic, activates Jitte twice, taking 5 off of Zach's life total, putting him to 10. And then he plays a Deathrite Shaman with a Green Lantern Altar. So we'll see if Zach can find his Dissenter's Deliverance or Nature's Claim to deal with this Umezawa's Jitte, as playing creatures at this point is kind of pointless. Until he removes the Jitte from the battlefield. So Zach is going to Flusterstorm. I'm not sure what Andrew tried to cast that he Flusterstormed, but he Flusterstormed something. And Andrew's going to swing in, pump for 5, or pump 2-5, excuse me. Zach's now down 2-5. And trying to decide if he wants to do anything else on his turn. Passes it back to Zach. Zach untaps. And there comes in a Pendelhaven. Fetches. Goes down to 4. And here we go. Green Sun Zenith for Viridian Corruptor. Yes, it is. And Andrew is going to attempt to daze it. And that is the match, everyone. Puts Andrew as the winner of the Alabama Legacy League IQ number 4, which means he's now queued for the Alabama Legacy League Invitational. And everyone else is going to still have to get their own points and through the leaderboard. So we'd like to thank everyone for watching this, and hope that you continue to tune in to MTG Training Grounds whenever we have Legacy IQs, and that you'll continue to check out each tournament.